Hi there. Welcome back to Love at First Right. This is our little online YouTube forum where we discuss all sorts of aspects of the writing process as readers and as writers and all the things that we love and kind of just try to figure it all out here of what makes a really wonderful, juicy story or series and how as writers can we knock it out of the park and what as readers we want out of our reading material because reading is such an intimate experience, far more intimate than watching something, because you get inside of a character's head. And that's really what I love about it. And I think that's what readers really love about consuming a story through the word, through the written word. And today I want to talk about historical fiction. And I'm interested in having this conversation about historical characters today, or characters that are not like real historical characters, but made up characters who live in the in the past. I was reading an online discussion between authors and readers, and they were talking about whether or not political correctness has affected historical fiction because apparently, at least according to some of the people on this thread, I don't have any real information about this other than what I was reading there. Historical fiction has seen a decline in readership recently, as has, I think, fiction to some extent, recently. And so I was thinking about that because I really have no idea if political correctness has had any real effect on whether people are reading historical fiction less, if indeed that is true. But I did think it was an interesting thing to talk about because one of the things, regardless of cultural trends, one of the things that any author of historical fiction must contend with is writing an authentic historical character, writing someone who truly would have had the mores and the worldview of a man or woman of whatever time we're writing in, and yet make that person relatable to a modern reader. And this is not as easy as it might seem. You might just think, well, I'm going to write a character exactly as that character would be in history, but not so fast. I remember talking to a friend of mine who who has written several historical fiction novels, and when he was researching a novel that took place in about the mid-19th century, and he was really poring over documents from that time and people from the time, and the very specific place that he was writing in, and he said that he was just overwhelmed with how often they cited the Bible and how their Christianity and their biblical verses were so crucial to just getting through the day, and their journal entries, their diary entries were filled with biblical quotes and their musings on them. And he was really struggling because he wanted, of course, his book to feel authentic and to be true to the time, and yet, he found himself glazing over, and he felt that a modern reader would be bored by this, and might be alienated by it. And he was really juggling putting enough of that in there to show just how important faith was to people living in that time. Their Christianity was to their time because it was such an indication of the way they saw the world and the decisions they made and why they made them. But also making it palatable for, someone today reading, right? And, I was thinking about why I love historical fiction so much. And one of the reasons why I think that it is just so delicious for me is because I am really interested in learning about myself and learning about what I would have done had I been living in that time. And not just in a flattering sense of, yes, I would have hidden the Jews. I would have been part of the Underground Railroad, because really we don't know. We don't know what would have been motivating us. As a mother, I could see myself being terrified for something happening to my children, even if I believed in that cause. Um, it is really, really difficult to say. And as someone who has a very dramatic family history, I have seen every type of decision. Um, in people that I actually know, I have seen people behave like tremendous heroes and sniveling cowards. And you don't always know how someone is going to behave, because what they say and what they do could be very, very different. You could have someone who says all the right things, but when it comes to doing something, they are frozen and they, point and say, nope. She's over there. She's hiding over there, And you could have someone who maybe is not what we would call politically correct, who does something tremendously heroic. And what I think is so interesting about writing from a historical character's point of view is endeavoring to make that person as humanly relatable as possible, as really focusing on what has made us human throughout time and what of that doesn't change. And then peppering the story, the novel, whatever it is, the screenplay, um, with um, with events of that time and the way that character might have viewed those incidents, and how that character might have reacted. I I I love posing those questions. I love having those questions posed to me. I love imagining um, under what circumstances I would be a heroine, and under what circumstances I would not live up to my own expectations. For one, I think that is an incredible bridge to others. I think that it helps us empathize much more so than, if we're just always reading about, people from the past always doing the thing that we would like them to do, so that we can kind of project our own heroism onto that story and imagine ourselves in that sort of heroic position. And that is, that's interesting as well. And that is, of course, an important part of reading, and it can be very delicious. But just as importantly, I think that we must be able to look at circumstances and understand how we as human beings are affected by our time. Um, I a few years ago, there was a reboot of Battlestar Galactica, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was terrific. And there was one show that really affected me, because I thought they did a really quite a good job of posing a very modern question, and yet changing the circumstances so that we look at that question from a different perspective. For those of you who are not familiar with the series, basically humanity is almost entirely wiped out on these series of planets, and the survivors, of like billions, are massacred in this horrible war with these cyborg creatures, and um, maybe only 50,000 human beings are left. We are an endangered species, and these human beings are on, this small group of starships that are hooked together, and they are trying to find the lost colony of Earth, right? And in one of these, a woman becomes pregnant, and I think she did not want to have a baby under those circumstances, because it was so precarious, and um, so she wanted to terminate her pregnancy, and the president of this, you know band of surviving humans, who was a woman, had to struggle with her beliefs, because she had always believed in the woman's right to choose. And suddenly, when she is faced with humanity dying, she was unclear and she struggled with it throughout the entire episode. And I thought that that was so interesting, and that it helps us understand people who have different points of view. It helps us understand our own point of view, and it helps us revisit um, revisit our beliefs. And I think that that is one of the things that history and historical fiction is able to provide for us. It is able to provide a dialogue between now and then, between our conscience and our behavior, and ties us all together, regardless of what we believe and how we behave. Even the worst of us, it ties us together as human beings. So thank you. I hope this has been at all interesting. And as always, I welcome your comments. And there is more on my Patreon page at Victoria Doherty on Patreon. Thank you.